So basically I watched Cosmonaut Variety Hour's video ranking and reviewing all the Harry Potter films recently, and it got me thinking about the series again. Not about J.K. Rowling as a person, we should clarify, in the same way anyone talking passionately about Roald Dahl stories you would hope does not include Roald Dahl as a person within that discussion. The Harry Potter books and films were immensely successful, reaching heights of cultural fever I don't think we've seen any other modern books reach before or since. Cultural fever is the right word. What exactly made the books and later films so incredibly successful though? Because it's not as simple as saying they're great books, which they are, but they're also flawed in many ways, obviously. Her ideas are unquestionably wonderful. Her writing itself is good, but I think Neil Gaiman, Ursula Le Guin, Philip Pullman, they're all much better writers, and yet none of them have hit the same heights. So that would suggest it's more down to the ideas themselves, and I think the blend of genres is one part of its success. A fantasy novel that's also a mystery novel that's also a boarding school story. Blending genres can be very effective, provided they blend in a way that's complementary, which they do in Harry Potter, because those three genres inform each other and the story emotionally. So this is my point one. Think about it, there's God knows how many stories about some school kid who has to battle evil or some supernatural forces and solve complex mysteries, all while somehow finding time to keep up with school grades. The difference is, with Harry Potter, he wasn't initially meant to battle evil or solve mysteries at all. He wasn't meant to do anything except keep up with his grades and be a normal school kid in a fantasy world. The parental figures of the Hogwarts teachers were the ones meant to do the battling, and in fact the whole reason half the mysteries became such mysteries was because Dumbledore or McGonagall or whoever else chose not to explain everything to Harry, because he's supposed to just be a school kid who needs protecting and needs to enjoy his childhood. And I know he is technically a chosen one figure and he does become that in the end, but there's still a different trajectory here. He's not just thrown into a world of battling evil and being the hero, he's instead thrown into a world that's meant to let him be an ordinary school kid, and it's then from his own active meddling, curiosity and habit for breaking the school rules that he finds himself battling evil, which appeals emotionally to that target demographic of children because we understand this struggle as kids. Parental figures making decisions for us, keeping secrets from us, protecting us from things we don't understand, telling us what to do because they know best, except sometimes they don't know best. Sometimes they're wrong, and kids are much more capable than they actually think. That's a fantasy that appeals as a kid, getting to prove the parental figure's wrong and say, look, I'm capable, you're the ones making a mess of things. I enjoy in particular that Michael Gambon's portrayal of Dumbledore made him much more flawed, impatient, kinda rude character, which made sense for the progression of the story. More and more you realise how flawed these parental figures we have are, and more we have to find our own way in the world instead. Also, the mystery and boarding school genres tie in perfectly because all the mysteries centre around Hogwarts and therefore don't work in opposition to school life. Plus, the fantasy informs that too by making it more believable. We'd roll our eyes at the idea of so many elaborate mysteries going on in our own real-life schools, but this is a school with mysterious elements built into its very brickwork. A place where staircases move, paintings talk, where you can discover places like the Room of Requirement or strange mirrors and giant sewer systems hiding a basilisk. Because of how fantastical and naturally mysterious Hogwarts is as a place, the idea of mysteries to be solved while still going to classes and keeping up with grades makes perfect, believable sense. Here's my second point though. Here's another fantasy that can appeal to us as children. Kid with unhappy home gets to escape into a magical world where people actually like him, where he excels at things, finds a sense of belonging and gets to be a hero. Is that not every kid's wish on some level? Those days where your parents shout at you or things go wrong, or, as can be unfortunately true, your parents are actually people much like Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia maybe. Who among us wouldn't say to themselves, I hate my family, I wish I could escape into some better world? Harry Potter gives us the chance to live that fantasy. We're deliberately shown how terrible and abusive Harry's domestic life is in the beginning so that we can indulge this fantasy when the lottery ticket feel of the Hogwarts letter sweeps him away to a happier home. I think I even touched on this sort of fantasy in my Coraline video actually. A story that shows the reverse of this fantasy. Harry Potter appeals because it can fulfill that idea for us. Point 3 is a point not unique to Harry Potter in a way. Probably none of these points are actually unique. It's the combination of them all together that hits so well, but the coming of age story in a fantasy world, this works particularly well in Harry Potter because A, the 7 books came out over a span of time for you to literally grow up alongside Harry, such as I sort of did actually. But you also get the emotional and tonal shift across the whole series that adds weight to this coming of age feel. Because the first book is only 75,000 words and it's full of wonder and awe, and yeah, the chess scene was kind of scary when I first saw it in the film, but it's basically a sweet and innocent book. Then as Harry starts to get older, the books start to get longer and the tone starts to get darker. The second book gives us giant spiders and snakes, the third gives us Dementors, the fourth gives us Cedric's death, then Sirius, then Dumbledore, and by this point J.K. Rowling has developed a thirst for blood and gone a bit mental. But Voldemort grows in power alongside this shift, things go wrong, and suddenly Hogwarts isn't a whimsical fun world to shelter us from the darker troubles and complexity of life, because that colourful cloak has found its holes. Hogwarts is no longer impenetrable, and Harry now has to stand up and fight for what he believes in. Most fantasy series have the shelter removed about 2/3 of the way through book 1. Narratively that gives it a lot more pace and arguably makes it more interesting, but for what Harry Potter is, this more gradual shift in tone helps to match the coming of age feel. Maybe not now, but at the time when the books and then the films were getting gradually released, it made this journey alongside Harry quite a big cultural phenomenon. The last 2 points I can think of are simpler ones. One is that Harry Potter gave America, the cultural juggernaut of planet Earth, some more idealised vision of what British life is. I don't think much of our world has transferred across the pond really, other than James Bond. More nowadays, but not traditionally. Then again, that Cosmonaut Variety Hour video addressed Britain by saying,
and no offense to British people, but you guys just haven't made that much stuff, okay? That's fine. I mean, what are some good British things?
I take offence. Yeah, British stories actually set in Britain with British people weren't particularly common in America. Yet here's a series of books that ties in nicely to our Celtic roots, that give the magic some foundation, also presents that stereotypically British, idealised view of boarding school history through places like Eton. You get to see London from time to time, with overly cockney bus conductors, wizard versions of good old-fashioned British pubs, and Ron saying bloody hell. Harry Potter found a way of exaggerating and idealising this slightly quaint yet quirky vision of British life in a way that makes it appealing to our louder, brasher American cousins. In a world where any stories set in Britain normally get turned into American remakes, Harry Potter had the chance to say, no, we can make Britain seem magical and attractive and help fulfill the escapism fantasy even more for Americans by the fact it is set in little old Britain. And it worked. Americans became far more obsessed with Harry Potter than we did, and America's standing as the world's cultural juggernaut then pushed Harry Potter even more, because what appeals to them is made to appeal to everybody else. Also, the movies didn't ruin everything. The movies didn't do a Percy Jackson or a Golden Compass or Stormbreaker or whatever else. The books were mighty successful, but they still needed the films to be good to elevate its popularity to the next level, and they basically were. They didn't ruin the books. Plus, the first film came out in the same year as The Fellowship of the Ring came out, then Chamber of Secrets the same year as The Two Towers, and then a bit longer for the third film, but still, two massive fantasy book series releasing film adaptations that are actually good around the same time. Arguably, they could have meant they cancelled each other out in competition, yes, but I think it made for a generation more widely into fantasy stories than before. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm also going to post something on Patreon ranking the films as I see fit, and I'll just end by saying, as a tangent, I'm not a fan of Fantastic Beasts. I think for the reasons I set out in my video about stories needing ends, she shouldn't have made any sequels or spin-offs beyond the 7th book. She should have let it end there, but if she had to, I'd either have made Fantastic Beasts a TV show sort of like Doctor Who, where forget all the Dark Grindelwald stuff, it's just quirky Newt Scamander devoting each episode to trying to catch or help some different magical creature each time. Either I'd have done that, or maybe made a film 10 years on where Hermione's the main character, and that now her childhood has passed her by, she finds herself missing her parents, whose memories she erased, and the film would be an emotionally charged story of her trying to use her smarts to desperately discover a way to reverse the Obliviate spell and get her parents back, and how this obsession of hers puts a strain on her marriage with Ron. I think that'd be great, and would sort of be an indirect way to explore some of the themes around the increasingly common experience of handling parents that end up with dementia. In fact, I think it's such a good idea, it's kind of a shame I don't have the rights to write that story. Oh well, let me know what you all think, what points I've forgotten if you think I'm wrong. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you fancy more, support me on Patreon if you fancy even more, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, special thank you goes to Devin, David Kling, Darren Burdock-Latter, Kestrel, Gay Hitler, Incomplete Sentient, Samara Salsi, Sharakov2814 and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.